The morning of June the 12th, 1962, Alcatraz Island. A guard walks the tier for the morning count, the same count taken every night for 30 years on the most secure prison in America. He stops at cell 138. The man inside hasn't stirred. He calls out. Nothing. He reaches through the bars and touches the face on the pillow, and the head rolls off the bunk onto the floor. It isn't a man. It's a head made of soap, toilet paper, and real human hair, painted to look like a sleeping face. In the next cell, another, and another, 3 of them, and behind each bunk, at the back of the cell, a hole, punched clean through the wall where a ventilation grill used to be. Frank Morris and the brothers John and Clarence Anglin are gone, off a fortress on an island, ringed by a mile of the coldest, most violent water on the California coast. 36 men had tried to escape Alcatraz before them. Not one had ever been proven to make it. For 5 weeks on this channel, we watched people break into the impossible. Tonight, 3 men break out of it, and to this day, no one knows if they lived or died. They called it the Rock, a federal prison built on a bare island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, just over a mile from the city, close enough to see the lights, far enough that the lights meant nothing. Alcatraz was where America sent the men no other prison could hold. Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, the escape artists and the incorrigibles. If you made trouble somewhere else, you came here. And from here, the theory went, you did not leave. Because the walls were never really the point. The real wall was the water. The bay around Alcatraz runs cold all year, cold enough to sap the strength from a swimmer's body in minutes. And the currents tear through the channel like a river, strong enough to drag a strong man out toward the open ocean. The island barely needed guards on that side. The sea did the guarding. In 29 years as a federal prison, there had been 14 separate escape attempts involving 36 men. Most were caught within hours. Some were shot. A few simply vanished into the water and were written down as drowned. On paper, the record was perfect. Nobody had ever escaped from Alcatraz and lived to prove it. 3 men in B Block were about to spend a year trying to break that record. The plan belonged most of all to Frank Morris, orphaned young, raised in foster homes, in and out of custody from his teens, and, by every account, extraordinarily intelligent. Prison tests reportedly placed his IQ near the top few % of the population. Morris was the kind of man who could look at a routine everyone else accepted and quietly find the crack in it. In the cells around him were the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, bank robbers from a big farming family in Florida, inseparable, and, crucially, strong swimmers who'd grown up diving into cold lakes as boys. And there was a 4th man, Alan West, in a nearby cell, a talker who, by some accounts, first pushed the idea. The 4 of them had landed, by luck of the prison's assignment, on the same short stretch of the same tier. Close enough to whisper, close enough to build. And when Morris studied his own cell, he found the crack he was looking for, low on the back wall, behind the bunk, a small ventilation grill, maybe 6 inches across. Behind that grill, he suspected, was not more prison. It was a way out of the cell entirely, if a man could only make the hole big enough to follow. The prison was old, and the sea air had been working on it for decades. The concrete around those vent grills had gone soft and crumbling, riddled with salt. It was the fortress's one weakness, and the men had noticed it before the government did. All they had to do was dig. Quietly, for months. Their tools were almost a joke, metal spoons smuggled from the dining hall, sharpened and set into handles. A crude drill reportedly built from the motor of a stolen vacuum cleaner. With these, night after night, they scraped and chipped at the rotten concrete, widening each 6-inch vent hole into an opening big enough for a grown man to crawl through. The danger was the noise, so they worked to a soundtrack. During the evening music hour, when inmates were allowed to play instruments, Morris took up an accordion, and the wheezing of the bellows covered the scrape of the tools. When a hole was done for the night, they hid it behind a fake grill, painted cardboard and a false wall, close enough to fool a guard walking past with a flashlight. For months, no one saw a thing. Because behind the cells was a secret the prison had forgotten. Once through the widened holes, the men didn't come out into a yard or a hallway. They came out into a cramped, unguarded utility corridor that ran the length of the block, a hidden spine of pipes and plumbing that nobody patrolled. And that corridor let them climb, up the pipes, 3 stories, to the top of the cell block, a shadowed no-man's land between the cages and the roof. There, over many months, they built a secret workshop, and what they made in it was extraordinary. Working with stolen materials and improvised tools, they assembled piece by piece the equipment for a sea crossing. They stitched together more than 50 rubber raincoats into a 6-by-14-foot raft and a set of life vests, sealing the seams with heat from the steam pipes. They carved wooden paddles, and they built the heads, dummy faces molded from soap, paper, and a cement-like paste, painted in flesh tones from the prison art kits, and finished with real human hair swept up from the barbershop floor. Those heads had one job: to lie on the pillows and pass the nightly count, buying the men the hours they'd need on the water. The night of June the 11th, 1962. They tucked the dummy heads into their bunks, arranged the blankets, crawled out through the holes, and climbed for the last time up to the workshop on the roof of the block. There was supposed to be a 4th, but Alan West, the man who may have started it all, had left his own hole too late. The concrete had set hard around his grill, and as the others left, he was still clawing at his wall. He couldn't get through. They went without him. The 3 squeezed out through a ventilator shaft onto the actual roof, 50 feet up, and crossed it in the dark. Then down, sliding down a kitchen vent pipe on the outside of the building, over 2 12-foot fences topped with barbed wire, and onto the cold rocks of the shoreline on the island's northeast tip. They inflated the raft with a modified accordion, worked like a bellows. And somewhere around 10 o'clock at night, they pushed off the rock into the black water of San Francisco Bay. And that is the last anyone ever saw of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. No sighting, no certainty. Just 3 men on a raincoat raft, disappearing into the fog and the current, aiming for a shore they might never reach. By morning, when the heads were discovered, they had a 9-hour start. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in the region's history. Boats, aircraft, searchlights sweeping the bay, the shoreline combed for days. And the searchers found things: a paddle, a life vest, a sealed waterproofed packet containing the Anglin's photographs and addresses floating in the water. What they never found was a body, not one. The FBI's conclusion was the cautious one, that 3 exhausted men on a homemade raft, in that cold and that current, had almost certainly drowned. Probably, but they could never prove it. And the absence of any body has kept the door open for 60 years. The Anglin family swore for decades that they got Christmas cards, and even a photograph. In 2013, a letter reached the police, supposedly from John Anglin, claiming he was still alive and in his 80s. Its authenticity has never been confirmed, and in 2018, a team of scientists modeling the tides concluded something remarkable: that if the men launched at exactly the right moment that night, around 11, the current could, in fact, have carried them to safety. An hour earlier or later, and it would have swept them out to sea. The FBI closed its file in 1979, but the US Marshals never did. To this day, officially, the case remains open. 3 fugitives who, if alive, would now be well over 90 years old. A year after the escape, Alcatraz shut its doors for good, and the question it left behind is the one every impossible escape leaves behind. Not just could they get out, but did they make it? For once, the honest answer is that nobody knows. These men used spoons, and a mile of freezing water stood between them and freedom. Next week, a prisoner so powerful the water didn't matter. He walked into the shower of a maximum security prison and dropped into a mile-long tunnel, lit and ventilated, with a motorcycle running on rails built to carry him out. Subscribe, and I'll see you then.